Welcome to the Biz Gone Social podcast. We help entrepreneurs navigate how to get known, get customers, and get the edge over their competition. Here is your host, Lorraine Duncan.
So here we are on the Biz Gone Social podcast, and I am so excited to be here. My promise to you, as always, is I want to give you a little bit of verbal caffeine. It's going to energize your business and help you stay social. Because after all, don't you want to be the business that everyone's talking about? I know I do. And I am so stoked today to have a really amazing guest on my show, Steve Cloward. Welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Appreciate you having me on.
So tell my audience, you have a very unique story. So put your story in there a little bit, but tell my audience a little bit about what you do and who you serve.
Hey, yeah, I've got a few businesses, but my main thing is, after some experiences that I've been through in my life that I imagine we'll talk a little bit about, is, I help people who are kind of letting their past get in the way of their future because of some things I experienced and how I allowed that to affect me for so long. That's just something I'm passionate about with the experiences that I've had and the things that I've been able to overcome.
Yeah. And I think, so often, and I can talk to probably, if I talk to 20 people today, something from their past is disturbing them, or something from their past comes up in conversation. And that's a pretty hard thing to do. How does one break from their past?
Well, it's interesting. And what I found is after, I won't go into much detail at this point, but, after kind of crashing and burning, after things I went through, after an opiate addiction for 14 years, getting sober for years, and then getting involved in a real estate mortgage fraud federal case, because I had a real estate appraisal firm, ended up in prison. And when I came out, so I've been very successful, grew up in Utah County and Utah, just south of Salt Lake City, and come from a family where my grandfather ran Brigham Young University food service for 35 years. My dad, so they were very well known in the community. And now I'm thrown into a situation where I'm on the news, and it was obviously devastating because of what I was, at least that I felt I was doing to tarnish my good name, basically, the last name Cloward, in our community. And so when I got out, I'd always been an entrepreneur. And I remember when my dad, when he retired from being a dentist, a few years later, we were talking, and he was talking to me about how he, kind of didn't know who he was anymore because he wasn't Dr. Cloward, and how he felt like he lost his identity. And that didn't really resonate that much with me at the time. But when I come out of prison and I'm, off probation, and now I can go back and try to do what I choose, I couldn't be an appraiser anymore because I had a very successful appraiser firm. And I frankly lost my identity. It's crazy how our careers, our professions, we allow that to define so much of who we are.
Yeah.
And it really messed with my head. And, with what I went through, obviously, I guess not obviously, but in my case, and I think in a lot of cases, I just lost confidence, and, not knowing who you are, where you fit in, what you're going to do. You can't, I couldn't do what I had done. And then when you lack confidence, that makes it very difficult to really push forward as an entrepreneur to go out and make things happen. And so I just, I continued as I worked with a couple of different coaches and men's groups. And I remember one time at one of the masterminds, we were doing what was called the walk and talk. After we went through a session, we'd walk and talk with one other individual and sharing kind of things that we had went over. And one of the guys, when I said something that as he stopped me, and I'll tell you what that was, I looked back at how I had been responding so similar for the prior few years. And what I was doing was, he asked me, why did you say before prison and after prison? It's like I was looking at myself in two different ways. And I was I was continuing to let that trip me up, and I hadn't ever seen it, and I wasn't doing anything that I loved at the time. I had a business, but it wasn't something I loved at all. And, one thing you learn really quickly is doesn't matter what you're in or what you're doing, no one's coming to save you. And I thought, I had a big telco business where we sold internet and home security and different TV services nationally. And I thought, well, man, if I just hire the right manager, and things will be good. There's no doubt key employees are important, but they're not going to be the ones that make it happen. That comes down to me individually. And so honestly, it was 8 years as I sat there and spent a lot of money on courses, coaches, consultants, masterminds, you name it, thinking that there was going to be this magic pill when I had already been through a lot of the things and really knew. But I think because of the lack of the confidence that I was lacking, I wasn't willing to see it and then own it and just push through it. And so it really came down, in my case, to mindset. That's the thing that I believe truly is the key, in so many things, but particularly in getting through a difficult situation or a trial. If you're going to sit there and be in victim stance, you're not going to make it. We don't understand the power of words and the power of thoughts, and they have massive power on what happens to us.
Yeah. So actually, you changed your thought patterns, you changed your mindset, and you became the success you are today. How did you go about rewiring your mind?
That's a great question. And, it was actually one of my coaches that he called it, I call it the same thing, a conscious self-creation statement. And, we probably all heard of the I am statements, the I have statements, whatever. I literally mapped that out. I finally sat down and did it. They say if you see it, write it, hear it, and read it, it's going to have the most power. At first, for a few days, I did that. But in all honesty, I ended up memorizing it, and then I just started saying it every day. And it just became habit and routine. Certain time of the day after I got up, it just automatically started happening. And, if too often we get hung up on thinking of how things will happen and, rather than just letting them happen. And as I started to do this, within 2 years, everything that I talked about in my conscious self-creation statement, literally had manifest in my life, and everything shifted. But like you say, more than that, that's obviously important, and it's not all financial. It's, every aspect of life. There was things I was, stating, and I remember when The Secret came out, whatever it was, 25 years ago or something, I totally bought into that. But what I didn't understand then that I totally understand now is there's a difference between having a vision board, having a conscious self-creation statement, meditating, whatever. But if you're just going through the motions and you're not feeling like, how would my life be if I have that epic marriage, that relationship, great relationship with my kids, I have the financial security again, the successful business, I work on myself so I love myself again, understand who I am. If you focus on what would feel like as if you're already there and already have the things that you're talking about, to me, that was the game changer. Because as I, bought into The Secret and stuff, I never really saw much changes in my life, by just having a vision board and, a couple little things. But once I did them with intention, and really was thoughtful and said, man, this is the way I'm feeling. But man, if I am this person that I'm defining and I have these things in my life, this is the way I will feel, and truly feel that peace, that happiness, then, I couldn't tell you the puzzle pieces that came together to make it happen, but it happened.
Yeah. And, so often, you said something really important, because it's something that over the past 10 years I've really worked at, is being more intentional. And I do believe that if you do set an intention, you just can't sit there and say, I think it's going to happen.
Yeah.
But you actually have to take some action.
Yeah.
Make those intentions happen. And I think, I want to ask you this question because, you mentioned your kids and your wife and everything. And so many of us, there's this balancing act going on when we're entrepreneurs. We're getting the clients, we're doing the marketing, we're in all these relationships with our spouses, with our kids, with our friends.
Yeah.
What do you think was the key? You went through a lot of ups and downs, but what do you think was the key of keeping your marriage together and your relationships together during the struggles?
Man, I'd like to take all the credit, but that's not going to happen because that's not the way it happened. I think, first of all, I'm incredibly grateful that my marriage survived. I've been married 33 years. And that obviously, that is a huge credit goes to my wife, because it would have been real easy for her to throw in the towel. I think my kids, my oldest is 33, 32, got 5 kids. My youngest daughter is 19. And, I would like to think that because of the things I did and they saw, that it actually impacted them in such a way that they knew that's not what they wanted. We've talked about it a little bit, but I think that really was one of the biggest things. And, when I went to prison, my oldest was going into his senior year in high school. And I remember calling home about 3 weeks in, and I'm sitting there being the victim, and poor me, not having the perspective that I got very quickly within the next few weeks, was that my wife and kids were the ones in prison. I mean, I was physically in a prison, but shit, my wife was in the prison, if we're being honest, because her whole world had turned upside down. She had her dream home and where the kids and their friends would be all the time. And now, I was going through the process of losing that for 18 months before I left. But then when I left, it was just a month later, they had to move out. And now she doesn't have the property and things that keep the kids and their friends wanting to be there. So now they're gone, which created a lot of anxiety for her. Not so much because she was worried about what they're doing, but, she was going through a difficult time, and they became very close, even though they were gone a lot. But, I think it's just commitment. It's so easy. I think in society today, we've created things where it's just okay to, I don't know if the right word's give up, but think that the grass is greener. I'm one that believes 100% that we all deserve to be happy. So if you're in a relationship and you're truly not happy and can't be happy, I mean, you both know that, then I don't think you should stay in it. But I also believe that if you understand that we're all different, and if you'll learn to communicate, number one, and one of the biggest things I did was we stopped working inside of expectations and sat down and communicated so that we work inside of agreements. And I try to do that not only in my marriage, but with my kids and with my business, because then, so often I'd get frustrated over the years of dumb things, but they're things that I thought my wife should do or know, but she can't read my mind. So unless we communicate and understand each other and have those agreements, then we're going to continue to have, problems, because we expect things that the other person doesn't know we expect, or we think they should know something that they don't know we think they should know, or do. And so that, and just the commitment that we, both believe that we wanted to keep our family together. She knew that a lot of the decisions I made inside my addiction were due to that. Not that, to me, I don't care. There's no excuse regardless. That's just the way I try to operate now. I own everything I have in my life, period. And that's something that I've learned, in the past 13 years. I got out of prison 13 years ago, last month on the 15th. And it's too easy to blame people, because when I was in prison, I know the truth. I know that and by the way, for those that might think it, prison had nothing to do with drugs or anything. I was sober for years. It had to do with a big mortgage fraud case. And so I often say that, the thing that I ended up going to prison over, I can truly say there was nothing I did that I was guilty of. that broke the law, but there's a lot of things I did in my addiction that would have put me in prison. And I truly believe there's no accidents in life. I needed that experience, even though it was totally BS and it was difficult and it rocked my world and everything. I just believe everything happens for a reason. And I needed that time out, because when I called home 3 weeks after I had gotten there and my oldest boy answered, I was the dad who, all my boys were baseball players. And when the new whatever bat, I can think of one just at their age, this Wilson Stealth bat comes out and it's a $299 bat. I don't take that, just get one and take it home to my high school baseball player. I got to take one home for all my boys, which I've got 4. And just dumb things like that it's just a waste, frankly. But I remember my son saying to me, he's 17 years old, he's now the man of the house after me being gone 3 weeks. And, he just said, Dad, none of that stuff matters. Yeah. Damn, it's sad to say that, that deep down, I know that. I knew that. And I was raised in a way to understand the things that mattered and what's important, but that doesn't mean I lived them, And had I lived in the ways that I know I should have from a financial standpoint, they wouldn't have gone through such a difficult time, because they had nothing. My wife was a nurse. She worked 1 day a week. When I left, she had to go up to 3 days, but that still wasn't really cutting it, And to have a 17-year-old have that perspective and be telling his dad that is, it hit me hard, right in the heart. And so, like I say, there's a lot of positives that come from difficult situations. It's just, do we choose to see what those are, and do we choose to learn from them, or do we decide that we're going to be a victim and say, poor me, or I got screwed over, that should have never happened? I say it's a blessing.
Absolutely. It's so funny. I go to a lot of, these different, motivational talks, or, I'm sometimes in a group where, people are being coached. And it always got me when somebody was still remained, and I remember going through some stuff where I had to, finally own that I was just like living too much in the past.
Yeah.
Because you tend to, sometimes it's a waste of time too, because you're dwelling on it. But the whole victim mentality actually does nothing for you, except it keeps you down.
Yeah,
it really keeps you down. And it's so funny because, I've been in a lot of these spaces, and I bump into people that I've seen before, and we were in little tables together and everything. And they're still in that victim mentality, and it doesn't serve them. And, so I think it's really great that you brought that up today, that, because that comes, when you become an entrepreneur, and this is the truth, all the bad stuff gets thrown at you, like the self-talk and everything that comes at you. Oh no, because your ego kind of wants to like protect itself, and all this stuff is happening. And it's like, believe me, it's like you have enough things to go through. So you got to get over the victim. I love it. I love that you brought that up. And by the way, it's like the reason I asked you the questions about your wife and kids and stuff, that in your bio, you had mentioned she is your queen. And I just love that. My husband always calls me his doll. And I just, I love when people have, terms for each other, and it's just it's so good to see in a world that doesn't, support marriage anymore, and they're trying to, whoever they are, the powers that be, whoever they are trying to wreck the traditional family. So I really, really love that. I'll probably get in trouble for what I just said, but I'm saying
well, that was another thing too, is like, if you look at from a relationship standpoint, particularly marriages, or if you're living with someone, your significant other, it's like going to prison. It didn't take me 24 hours, but to realize the things that I took for granted. And those are typically the people and the things that matter most to you. And those are the people the closest to you. And so as we're in a new relationship and courting, you look at the things that you do and the effort you put in, whether it's to plan a date or et cetera, versus how quickly you can just take things for granted and then start just living day by day without much thought or intention and effort into that relationship, And I think that's what plays a big part in people growing apart. And, you have to invest, you have to water what you want to grow, And so if you want to have a good relationship, you have to put effort into it and you got to keep watering it.
Absolutely. I feel like we already got real, but these are questions that I always ask. And so I always preface this, I want to get really real, but in back to business again, what do you love the most about being in business for yourself?
Well, the reason I do it is honestly, time freedom is number one, because there's nothing that makes me feel better than impacting another person. And whether that's an employee, whether that's a client, or whether it's a family member, neighbor, someone in the community, doesn't matter. And without time freedom or even money, frankly, you can't have a big, you can still have a big impact on clients, obviously, but I don't want to be just one dimensional. I want to be able to, if there's an organization I believe in or a family or individual that needs help, I want to be able to say, hey, I can go and do that. I don't have to be stuck at a job and so that's really what drives me, and to be in control of my own destiny.
Yeah. And, we both know that being an entrepreneur is not a skate in the park for sure.
No, it's not.
And there's some struggles that we have. And personally for you, what is your biggest struggle in today's world in running your own business?
It's one that has always been there. And even though I've learned a ton about it and I can see it every single day, it's letting go. I'm a control guy, freak, if you want to say it that way. And delegation is very tough. But if you're going to be a very successful entrepreneur, you've got to be able to learn to delegate. That doesn't mean you can't be a successful entrepreneur as a solopreneur. You can do that. But there's nothing wrong with that. And you can make a good living and be happy, I believe. You need to do what makes you happy, period. That's the key. I think too often we get caught up in what we believe society has conditioned us to think things are supposed to be like, or what the internet's showing us that things should be like. I think we got to get back to really our authentic selves. What is it that you truly want for you in your life? Is that what you really want, or is that what you've been conditioned to think you need to be doing? And there's a big difference, but letting go and delegating is a huge thing. I remember it's been probably 25 years ago. I went to a morning breakfast meeting. I can't remember what organization it was, but Larry Miller, who used to own the Jazz, and he's a very, very wealthy guy. He's passed away. In fact, he passed away in prison, so probably 14 years ago. But this guy had multiple car dealerships. He's got insurance agencies. He's got movie theaters. The Utah Jazz, the minor league baseball team in Utah, and here he was at the pinnacle of his career. And he said he had only just a few years earlier stopped being his own worst bottleneck. And prior to that, any check over $5,000, and you got to imagine there's a ton of them over $5,000 at his business, as large as it was, he required to come across his desk. And he said when he learned and understood how much that was slowing down his business, and when he was able to let go, that just changed everything for them. And so, yeah, for me, it is that I try to do everything.
Yeah. And it is very hard to let go. I remember I even let my inbox go too. I have somebody that runs my inbox. That was hard.
Yeah.
But, you've been just a wonderful guest, and I just want to thank you so much. If somebody resonated with you today and needs to talk to you, how would they get in touch with you?
You bet. You can go to mindsetIsTheKey.net. That's a free ebook that you can grab. Talks about mindset. Doesn't have, any follow-up emails that's trying to pitch on anything. So don't worry about that. If you want to, if you just like to chat, no strings attached, you can email me at steve@stevecloward.com. That's steve@stevecloward.com. Be happy to chat with anybody.
That's awesome. Well, thank you again. And until next week, everyone, I'll see you soon. This is Lorraine from the Biz Gone Social Podcast. Bye now.
Thanks for listening to the Biz Gone Social Podcast. Find us on Instagram at Biz Gone Social for extra tips. Check back weekly for new episodes. Until next time, stay social.